Hello, and welcome to the Arizona Civics Podcast. In this podcast, we will share our journey of sustaining Arizona's interest in reforms to civics by collaborating with civic educators in our state and nationwide. This important work is being spearheaded by the Center for American Civics at Arizona State University. I'm Liz Evans, Civic Education Program Director at ASU, and your host for this podcast. I will interview teachers, content experts, and civic education leaders throughout our episodes, providing valuable insights and perspectives. We hope you enjoy joining us on this journey to make Arizona a national civics model. I'm so excited on our podcast today. We're going to be talking about probably for me one of my biggest idols, and that is Justice O'Connor. And I'm really honored and excited to have Sarah Suggs, who is the president and CEO of the Sandra Day O'Connor Institute, with me. And really the goal of our episode today is to discuss the legacy of Justice O'Connor and really how she has helped shape civic education in Arizona and beyond. Sarah and I both work for kind of sister organizations. So thank you, Sarah, for taking time to be on our podcast and to have this conversation with me today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So what I'd like you to do first is for listeners who have, who don't know you and your role at the Institute, I'm going to have you go ahead and introduce yourself and then kind of explain a little bit what your role at the Sandra Day O'Connor Institute is. And then we'll kind of get into a little bit more of what the Institute does.
Sure. Well, I'm Sarah Suggs, President and CEO of the Sandra Day O'Connor Institute for American Democracy. It was founded by Justice O'Connor following her retirement from the Supreme Court in 2009.
And what is it? So before we started recording, I had shared with you that I have been to some of the issues forums, which I really appreciated as a teacher.
Yes.
The dinners, the legacy lunches, there's so much that the Institute does. So can you kind of explain to me, what the Institute does and how it's really benefiting Arizonans in that civic capacity?
Sure. Well, it's been an interesting journey through the pandemic. And the silver lining for us was that we converted so many of our programs to a digital platform. And in fact, we've been in strategic planning in that regard with an initiative that we'll be launching in early 2023. But one of the outcomes, again, was moving things online, as well as delivering, once we were out of the pandemic, some of our traditional civics education programs. For youth, we have 3. And our longest is Camp O'Connor, which is a week-long, we call it our democracy boot camp affectionately. And it's for incoming 7th and 8th graders. It is an experiential democracy camp that takes a branch of government a day at a time. It immerses them. It is not like school. They experience that branch in a very robust fashion. They come in on Monday, and by Friday, they leave ready to run the world. And so we just love this program, and Justice O'Connor is the one who really came up with this idea following a lunch we had for some summer interns many years ago, who each, although they were graduating college soon, they all lamented that they had not had more civics, experiencing, understanding it, and this type of really beyond the book. So that very day, Camp O'Connor was conceived. Another program we have in Arizona is for high school students, and this is an extracurricular program, the O'Connor Ambassadors Civics and Debate Clubs. We have been piloting this program in 2 states, Florida and Arizona. We've just completed our pilot year, and we will be expanding and offering this to other schools free of charge. The impetus came out of really Camp O'Connor and 2 of our alumni. And they were now in high school and said, I know so much more than my classmates. Can you help us bring a program to our school that's extracurricular? And so we worked with them over the course of time, to come up with a curriculum. It is directed by our director of civics education, and he oversees the programs. And so we're pushing that out this fall and making it available to any school through an online toolkit. And that really, as the name implies, it's debate, it's civility, it's civics education, and it has a community engagement volunteer program aspect as well. And then the third is our Civics Challenge. And this is a digital program for seventh, eighth graders, sixth, seventh, and eighth graders. And it allows them to use their device to create a short video on civics, any particular, there are three branches of government, checks and balances, or Justice O'Connor's life, or other art mediums such as a poster, poetry, a song, an essay, and they can earn educational tools such as an Apple Mac Pro, iPads, and things of that sort. And that we launched, as I said, during the pandemic, and now we're going into our fourth year.
That's amazing. And for those of you listening, I will make sure in our show notes to put all of the links to all of these. I know that when I was a teacher and a department chair, we tried to get our middle schoolers to participate in the Civics Challenge because it was for them. I think sometimes kids think, when they learn stuff in school, when are we ever going to learn this? And the opportunities that you provide at the Institute really allows them to see that in action. It allows them to see the civics in action, which, for our students in Arizona, but really for students everywhere. So it's really neat to hear that you are expanding because Camp O'Connor this year was actually in Arizona. Wasn't it in another state as well?
Yes, we received funding from Colorado to deliver Camp O'Connor in Denver, and so we were thrilled and had a educators in that city. It was held at the Sturm College of Law at Denver University, and then of course our Phoenix campus held at the ASU Sandra Day O'Connor College of Law.
Yes, and if listeners they have stuff on all their social medias, it's just really cool to watch civics in action and watch these students thrive, right? Because yes, they get this instruction in the classroom, but once they see that they can take it and they can move past, and there's more to learn than just what the three branches of government are, but really kind of digging into that, it can be such a life-changing experience for some of these students.
Exactly. And in fact, we survey them each day, and the comments and feedback we get, and from the parents, is so heartwarming and rewarding. You would never think a topic like civics that these kids would come out just so thrilled and so excited. And some of them have gone back to their schools, talking about Camp O'Connor here. In some rural areas, we have, through the Marley Foundation, we specifically reach out to rural communities. We have scholarships where we can house the student and one parent or guardian so that they can attend. Some of these youth have no student council back at their school, and they've gone back, started a student council, lobbied, petitioned, became the student body president, went on to Girl State, Boy State, went on to high achievement, study abroad. I mean, it's just put them on a traction, sixth grade going into seventh, that they're on a trajectory. We have siblings that come back. One family comes to mind this summer from Nogales. And this young boy was so excited to travel to Phoenix and stay across the street from the law school with his mother. And he was there bright and early every day, just raring to go. And we know he's going to really go places.
I love that you are really trying to look at rural areas because I think when people think of Arizona, they think of Phoenix, they think of Tucson, they think of Flagstaff, but really our state has so many incredible communities that are rural that often don't have these opportunities for outreach and this accessibility. And, for students in that area, to be downtown and to see the College of Law and see what can be outside of their communities, I think can be such a powerful thing, not only for the student, but when they go back and talk to their teachers about it too.
Exactly. And in fact, our Director of Civics Education, Benjamin Maynard, has been working on our what we call our Camp O'Connor USA model. It's a toolkit that will allow us to push it out and make it available through an online portal. And we're looking at the branches of government exist in every, not just state capital, the nation, the state, the capitals, the county seats, and every municipality. There is the mayor, there's the city council, and there is a local judge. And so those examples exist in every town. And so in some cases, not everyone's able to travel. And so we're looking at ways that we can bring Camp O'Connor to more communities. And we're in discussion right now about that model and funding. So it's an exciting time.
And this really kind of takes us to our next piece here is this is Justice O'Connor's legacy. As an Arizonan, I think I know more about her life just because, I'm from here. But she broke a lot of barriers and she was involved in state government. There's so much more to her than being a Supreme Court justice, which I think, nationally she is most known for. So I'd like to take a little bit of time to just kind of explore Justice O'Connor's life and
Mhm.
this legacy of civic education that she has, you know, worked so hard to build. And it's so, again, as an Arizonan, as a woman, as somebody who really is into civics,
Mhm.
she's an amazing role model.
Right.
So can you tell us a little bit more about her life for maybe people who don't know?
Course. It's interesting. You're right. She shattered the glass ceiling for an equal branch of power. And when you think about that and the individual that it must have taken to serve 12 years on the Supreme Court as the sole female, uh, it took a lot of moxie, to say the least, not in addition to brilliance and judicial knowledge, etc., experience, wisdom, prudence. The unique characteristics of Sandra Day, as I've gotten to know her over the last 10 years and just studied her life, she grew up on a ranch in southeastern Arizona called the Lazy Bee, roughly 200,000 acres. It spread over Arizona and into New Mexico. It was there was no hospital near the Lazy Bee, so she was born in El Paso, Texas, and came back to the Lazy Bee, and the closest school was something like 10 miles away, and on a dirt road. And so her parents sent her to live with her grandparents in El Paso so she could get an education. And when you think how she thrived, she graduated high school a year early. Her father, DA, was, as she called him, always aspired to go to Stanford. But because of the Depression, he was called back to the Lazy Bee and had to forfeit that dream. So that she grew up only hearing about Stanford. And so that's the only college to which she applied and was accepted. Uh, she majored in economics and ran into a law professor one day that piqued her interest. And so she applied to law school and was accepted. She went on to she graduated third in her class. First was William Rehnquist, her classmate. But she tells a story about upon graduation, her fiance and then new husband, John J. O'Connor, received an offer from a prestigious law firm in San Francisco. And there was a bulletin board at Stanford with some 30 index cards with the names of law firms call for job interviews. She called all 30, and all 30 told her, "We do not hire women." So she went to San Mateo, talked to the district attorney, city attorney there, and asked if she might get a job there. And he said, "Well, we don't have any money in our budget to pay you." She said, "Well, what if I volunteer? I just really want to practice law." And he said, "Well, we don't have an office, but there's a table next to my secretary. You can use that." And so that's what she did. And her first job was working for nothing on a table. And eventually they found some money, scraped it together in the budget to pay her a stipend. But she's always found a way. And similarly, she comes back to Arizona with her husband, John, after he serves overseas in the military. And she always wanted to come back to Arizona. So they moved to Phoenix. Once again, John O'Connor is offered a job at a very prestigious law firm, and she can't get hired anywhere. So they go down to Tucson to take the state bar, and as where it took place at the time. And she said she ran into a young attorney and said, well, I learned that he was from the East Coast. And she said, well, that's a long way away. What are you doing in Arizona? And he said, well, during World War II, I was stationed at Luke Air Force Base. And I said, if I ever get out of this war alive, I want to go to Arizona. And that's where I want to live and maybe get married and raise a family. And she said, well, where are you going to practice law? He said, I don't know. And she replied, well, there's a real estate developer named John F. Long who's building a shopping center out in this place called Maryvale. 51st Avenue and Indian School Road, there'll be a shopping center. How about we hang up a shingle and practice law? He said, okay. So she said in those days, there were no public defenders, that the courts gave young attorneys cases to represent the indigent. And so that was her first experience in Arizona practicing law, was as a public defender. Then she told me that she always aspired to work in the Attorney General's office. She wanted to become an assistant attorney general, an attorney general. She called and they were not hiring women. But she learned that the Attorney General was running for re-election. So she went to one of his campaign meetings and walked up to him afterwards and said, do you need any volunteers? He said, yes, I sure do. So she volunteered and was stellar in every way, as you might imagine, as a volunteer. And when he was reelected, she applied and was hired. So she's always found a way to achieve her goals. And that's one of the things, I think, the grit of growing up on a ranch in the middle of in the Southwest, and always having to find a way, always having to find a solution. Something broke, you didn't drive down to Ace Hardware or the Home Depot. There was nothing, you had to figure it out. And I think that's one of the attributes that I admire most about her, is her perseverance and just her dedication to her goals and objectives. And she is just completely, as you know, achieves them.
I think you talk about this grit, and oftentimes, we're not that far removed from women not being hired for jobs. We're not that far removed, from a lot of these things. And I think that's my favorite thing about her is, even the stories I've heard, when she was in the Arizona state legislature, or,
Right.
when she was a Supreme Court justice, her, with the EAD framework that we're working with, that our listeners are familiar with, was
Right.
working with civics, the term is civic friendship.
Mm-hmm.
And how she really exemplified that, and, getting people together and having food and having these conversations
Right.
to try to come to some sort of compromise or to try to move things forward, I think is, just there's many favorites I have about her, but that really being, I'm not going to give up, but I'm going to, and I'm going to find these little ways to
Mm-hmm.
be successful and to go after what I want.
Right. Right. Exactly. And again, just picking up on that thought, after the Attorney General's office, she was an assistant attorney general, part of the executive branch. And then there happened to be a vacancy in the state Senate, and that needed to have the term fulfilled. And so she was appointed to fill that for a period of time. And then she decided to run in her own right and was elected. Now, this is in the 70s. And not only was she elected a state senator, she was elected by her peers as the Senate majority leader, the first woman in the entire nation to hold that position of any state legislature in all 50 states. And so how does that happen? Well, because she was a consensus builder. When there was an issue at the state capitol, she was renowned for inviting her colleagues on both sides of the aisle to her home and cooking Mexican food and serving beer or margaritas or whatever. But that hospitality, as she has said, it's hard to argue with someone over a meal. And so but it was always with a purpose to find compromise, to find common ground, as she said, perhaps starting at the fringes, but working in until you found enough to agree upon, go back to the state capital, write that legislation to move our state forward. And so she was a catalyst. Now she's in the legislative branch. Next, she has an opportunity to become a judge. And so she's in the Superior Court and the Court of Appeals. Governor Bruce Babbitt, called a Democrat, a friend of the justice, called her and said, there's an opening. I'd like to appoint you. And off she is, here she is now in the judicial branch. She is one of the very few Supreme Court justices in United States history that has served in all three branches of government. And when you think about that, and understanding how our government works, and when a law comes to the court, and perhaps it deals with state law, maybe it deals with the executive, whatever it happens to be. I mean, she understood at a very fundamental level, not just what that meant or represented, but the impact and the implications. So I just think that she was, I think the stars aligned to, so that Sandra Day O'Connor was destined to be the first woman on the court.
And one of the best quotes when she talks about, her time on the court is she was the first and she wanted to make sure she wasn't the last.
Exactly.
And, I've read so many books about Justice O'Connor and, her friendship with Justice Ginsburg, different sides of the ideological spectrum, but they were friends. And I think that people don't realize these justices are colleagues and they're friends. And she did the same consensus building, on the court with, again, her college friend, William Rehnquist, as the chief.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And so, yes, and it's a wonderful thing when when there's mutual respect. And I think that's fundamental to civility and civil discourse. But I also think it's understanding that there are other points of view, and it's okay to have other points of view. But somehow you have to create an environment that allows those points of view to be respectfully heard. And she's an extraordinary example. And so at the Institute, we have three pillars that are each embodied in the justice. They are, of course, civics education, civil discourse, and there's no better example, and civic engagement. And Justice O'Connor served in a volunteer role for decades, from local Girl Scouts boards, the Heard Museum, to the Rockefeller Foundation, the Smithsonian. I mean, she has not only in her career, but she has sweat equity in philanthropy, and so we just follow her. It's not all we have to do is follow her example. We'll be fine.
And that's an amazing example. So, with this legacy of civic engagement and civic education, what do you feel is important for really Arizona teachers and students and parents, really just, I guess, Arizonans as a whole, to kind of take from Justice O'Connor's career and her legacy?
So Governor Ducey, several years ago, with the legislature, established Sandra Day O'Connor Civics Celebration Day. And we are grateful for that, for Governor Ducey recognizing her important role in our state, in our nation, but what her love for civics and her dedication. So that legislation, which is the day closest to September 25th each year, September 25th being the day in 1981 that she was sworn in to the U.S. To the Supreme Court, allows or provides that 2/3 of the classroom day, as you know, be spent on civics. When you look at how is civics woven into today's curriculum, and you're working on EAD, You well know how hard it is sometimes to infuse civics somehow. There's a lot of focus on STEM, which is excellent and wonderful, and we support that. But we're looking at ways, through perhaps reading. You have to read. If you're going to read something, may as well read in about our nation's history or the Declaration of Independence, the framers, one of the Bill of Rights, what have you. So there are ways to get there, just like Justice O'Connor used to do. She always found a way.
And I don't think that people realize that civics is a part of everything. I think sometimes people think, well, civics is social studies, civics is history. We don't need to teach that. But no, civics is in math and it's in science and it's in, all of these different subjects. It's like you said, in English, we're reading things and we're really trying to, Supreme Court decisions, right? We're trying to understand where they're coming from. And civics is woven into every part of our life. I'm thinking about science, for example. There are people that work on sustainability and water issues in Arizona. That's taking science in a civic manner, and it doesn't have to be a separate thing. And I think that's, one of the things with your institute and the work we're doing here at ASU is really trying to get people to understand it's not a standalone thing. Civics is in every day and it's almost in everything that you do, whether it's in your local community, your school, your town, your state, whatever that really looks like is we want to make sure we're weaving that all in. And Sandra Day O'Connor Day is the perfect day to do that. And this year we're doing a civics week because September 17th is Constitution Day. And it kind of really gives us this special and unique opportunity here in Arizona to celebrate Arizonans, to celebrate our country, and to really, again, not just have it be 1 week or 1 day, but as a catalyst to more civic engagement in schools.
Exactly. And children, when they are empowered through civics, look at some of our camp alumni, going back to their schools, understanding that they're get a petition. They get a petition and they walk around and they get signatures from the classmates, and then they take that to their teacher, and then they go to the principal. And there's a way in civic engagement to the application of civics. And that's really what we are trying to do, is the real world application of civics. And we see it come to fruition with our alumni, with these youth, and it's amazing. It's like something is ignited in them, and they are just off to the races. And we keep in touch. We have a wonderful database. We get emails from the parents. Now my child's a sophomore doing this, and that. And so it's a wonderful, heartwarming thing.
And I think, people often say like, oh, kids these days don't care. They're so worried about social media and whatever. But they're not. They do care. And we see this in the camps. We see this in the civic engagement. And once you said it, once you empower students and give them that knowledge, they care a whole lot more, than we think. And it's such a awesome thing to watch a student learn something from your camp, learn something, from really anywhere, and apply that in their community.
Right.
Because kids do care. You just have to give them the opportunity to do so.
And there's such brilliance, but in the absence of knowledge, I'm angry about X. Okay, well, I'm going to go tell the president, that I'm angry about X, or I'm upset about X. Well, what are you going to do about it? Well, that understanding who your representatives are. What is the nature of the issue? Is it a local issue? Is it a state issue? Is it a federal issue? Which is the representative that represents that branch or that level of the government? And so finding out, oh, you mean I should go to my mayor? I want a crosswalk by my school. oh, I'm not going to go to the president, just fundamentals of understanding the structure of government, in addition to all the other inner workings. It's just, as I said, knowledge is power with these young people, and it gives us great hope with the future. And it's important. What you're doing is so important. What iCivics is doing is so important. There's no silver bullet. It's everyone with their oar in the water, because it's what it's going to take to keep our democracy flourishing.
I love that. And I'm glad you brought up iCivics. Teachers, if you are not familiar with iCivics, it's another one of Justice O'Connor's initiatives. I myself have been an iCivics educator in the Educator Network for, I think, since it started, because I utilized it a lot when I taught middle school, and they grabbed onto it and they like the games, and it starts those wheels turning. And so she has just left us with so many amazing things.
Mhm.
And it makes me proud to be a woman. It makes me proud to be an Arizonan. Um, and it makes me proud to have known her and met her. And, the work that you're doing at the Institute, I think is so powerful. I wish that everybody could come to your events. I know for me, being able to meet people like Doris Kearns Goodwin or listen to Evan Thomas and Justice O'Connor's sons talk about her, or, I went to a issues forum on a proposition that was on our state ballot on marijuana, because as a teacher, I wanted to understand what it was. I wanted to hear the sides so that when my students asked me, I just had a better view of it and could really get them to understand. A lot of times when you see things on the screen
Right.
or these little sound bites, it's a lot more than that. And part of being civically engaged is understanding what you're voting on and being out there in your community. So I'm glad that you brought up iCivics, but listeners, I think please make sure in the show notes you look at the events of the O'Connor Institute. I was actually lucky to bring a group of students with another teacher to listen to the Chinese ambassador. And even for them, they got to meet Justice O'Connor, and that picture is hanging up in my living room. And they talked about it forever because she said to them, don't stop learning.
Mhm.
And to have someone like Justice O'Connor say that to a group of students, and anytime I met her, she was so appreciative of me being a teacher, which, to me, the first woman Supreme Court justice is saying that to me. So is there anything else that, we want to make sure our listeners hear or that we cover? Because I feel like we could talk about Justice O'Connor all day long.
It's true. Well, I just want to say that our mission is to advance the legacy and lifetime work of Justice O'Connor through multi generational civics education, civil discourse, and civic engagement. And when we look at uh, the void of civics knowledge, not just for children, but those who have long left higher education. And there's this big knowledge gap. What 40 some percent of adults can't name the three branches. I mean, there are woeful statistics that one can quote, but how do you remedy that? And so one of the things that we've been working diligently on with our strategic plan, as I mentioned, for early January of next year, is to roll out this multi-generational initiative, because we do believe in lifelong learning. Just as the justice said, don't ever stop learning. And our democracy, you're not given the keys to the car when you graduate high school and say, okay, now you know everything, about civics, have a nice life. These are things, and we obviously see this in society today, that civics knowledge, how our government functions, how you can have a productive role in society and actually move the needle proactively, positively, that needs to be disseminated. And that's one of the reasons we're here.
Well, thank you so much. I feel like I hope we get lots of listeners, especially prior to Sandra Day O'Connor Day, because I think the more teachers can talk about her, the more we can discuss her legacy. And like you said, move that needle and continue to not only work with students, but really take that multi-generational approach. I love that. Thank you,
My
Sarah. I really
pleasure.
appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for your interest in the Institute and, of course, Justice O'Connor.
To find out more about the Sandra Day O'Connor Institute for American Democracy, visit their website at o'connorinstitute.org. Thank you for joining us. Just wanted to give a heads up that you can find the Center for American Civics on all social media channels as ASU Civics. We love connecting with our community and sharing our thoughts on the issues that matter to us. So if you're interested in our content or just want to say hi, don't hesitate to give us a follow. Plus, we always include any relevant links in our podcast show notes, so be sure to check those out too. Thanks for being a part of our journey.